Welcome back. My name is Brett. I'm an author, writer, and no. Welcome back. I'm a writer. Welcome back. My name is Brett. I am a writer, an author, and a book coach. And today we continue to go through the Storyteller's Almanac and talk about characters. The big one. This is, the story core is the most important. But characters are super critical to get right because this is what will make or break your story. Stories live and die by the characters. If your reader doesn't like your characters, they're not going to read the story. It's about that human connection. It's about that writer to reader connection through your characters. So we got to make sure that we're getting it right. So let's go ahead. Let's flip in here to characters. They're the driving force of the story. A character has to be the manifestation of the story core. Whoever they are, whatever the story core is, their entire existence, their entire identity is inspired by that story core. So kind of as we talked about last time with The Way Back to Us and, friendship helps us carry the trauma we endure. Okay, if that is our story core, then our main character has to be connected to that. They have to be inspired by that. So it's someone who has trauma and probably is reluctant to share that or be open about that. And over the course of the story, makes friends, earns friends, finds friends, reconnects with friends, and learns that they can really help him carry that and make it feel lighter on his shoulders. So already we have an arc. We have a rough character idea. In the story, I have some general character advice which you can go through. Readers love an underdog. They have to be relatable and all that kind of stuff. But what is really important in the Storyteller's Almanac is the scaffolding that we can use to create characters and this character detail index. Any significant character that you have in your story, whether that's protagonist, antagonist, supporting character, they kind of need all of these. We kind of need to answer all of these questions. And some of these come from other stories or other books like Story Genius or Anatomy of a Story or other things like that. But I've kind of pulled it all together to help you create the scaffolding for your main character. So the protagonist is everything. We have to make sure that we have a solid protagonist. And the name, the description is all very important. The anchor description is, it always makes me think of Dumbledore from Harry Potter and his sparkling blue eyes. That is kind of J.K. Rowling's anchor description for him. So if someone has sparkling blue eyes, you're like, oh, it's probably Dumbledore. It's something that a reader can instantly connect to that character, make them recognizable. But the real thing here, the most important, is the lie they believe, their want, and their need. These three things are probably the most critical, the most essential when it comes to building characters. And specifically the lie that they believe. And this is something that they can believe about themselves. This is something that they can believe about other characters. But again, this has to be connected to the story core. So if our story core is friends help us carry the trauma that we endure, then the lie that this person believes, the main character, Davin, is I have to do this all on my own. I am alone. I have to do this all on my own. That is the lie that they believe, that they're going to wrestle with. And as they wrestle with that and realize that it is a lie, that it is holding them back, they can realize that other people, they're not in it alone, right? They can have these friends that help them carry the weight of it. The lie is super critical and it has to be connected to the story core. Their want is something worldly, something that they want to achieve, and it is also connected to their lie. So if Davin's lie is, I have to do it all by myself, his want is to be the leader, to be making the decisions, to be in control of his life, and not let anyone else in, not let anyone else help him. That's kind of his want. It's directly connected to the lie that he believes. And it really manifests in his decisions and the way that he moves and even talks to people. Their need is the realization, right? This is what they need to understand, what they need to realize, what they need to let go of in order to grow. And Davin's need is he needs to realize he can trust other people and that he can be vulnerable with other people. So that's really his need. So the lie that they believe, their want, their need, those three need to be solid. And that's going to take time. It's not necessarily going to be super apparent. It might even take a draft to really understand what their lie is, what their want is, what their need is. writing is a process. It's a marathon. It takes time. The first draft is truly just figuring out what this book is even about, what your story is even about. Take time. It'll develop. Write in pencil, probably. Their psychological flaw, their moral flaw, these are things that hurt other people, hurt themselves. This just helps gives their, their personality, the way that they move and operate, some context, some interesting flavor. Agency, competency, likability. I give you like a nice little graph here where you can kind of like shade in and really kind of figure out like where are we putting those points. You've got 20 points between agency, competency, and likability. If they're the main character, they need to have agency. They need to be moving the plot forward. They need to be moving the story forward. They should be somewhat competent but not overcompetent, because then they become overpowered and there's no challenge. And they need to be at least somewhat likable. And by likable, we mean that you can, like, the reader can understand that they share similarities. Like, oh, Davin is a guy and he lives in some sci-fi speculative future, but I still, like, I feel like I could be like him. It's not necessarily like, oh, I love Davin, necessarily. It's more like I see why that they are making the decisions that they're making, and I would probably make the same decisions if I was in the same position. Like means, like, similarity, not appeal, affection, admiration, whatever. I always like to frame characters in their arcs by, like, they have a first major choice and a second major choice, and those two should rhyme. So for Davin, for example, his first major choice is, he has an opportunity to kind of create a more communal leadership structure within his group of survivors in the story. And he doesn't. He's like, nope, I'm going to be the leader. I'm going to be making the calls. It's all on me. It's all on my shoulders. We're going to be doing what I say. And because he has some expertise and some skills, everyone kind of goes along with that. Later in the story, after he has confronted the lie he has believed, after he gets rid of his want in exchange for his need, then he decides, I'm going to let other people in. I'm going to let them help me make the decisions. I'm going to allow them to, be a part of this process. I'm actually going to follow them. I'm going to follow their lead. So we see, like, the first major choice, the second major choice, they're very similar. They echo, they rhyme. But it's also an opportunity for you as the writer to show the growth that this character has gone on over the course of the story. So it's kind of a very similar, like, A-B decision. And in the beginning, they choose A. And in the end, toward the end, they choose B. And it shows that they have grown and changed as a person over time. The moral will do's, the moral won't do's. What will they do to achieve their goal? What will they not do? That just kind of gives them, like, an ethics code, a moral code. The more morally gray characters, that gets really interesting and really spicy. It's like the Robin Hood, like, oh, I would never steal from a poor person, but I would steal from a rich person. These contradictions, these exceptions to the rule really kind of make characters interesting. So focus on those exceptions a little bit. The quirks and skills, this is kind of just an opportunity to write in specific little character notes about them. Like, my main character in the Wild Sky Legacy, Arden, loves strawberries. Boom, I put that in there so I remember it. Or she also has the ability she's not really a hacker per se, but she understands some of these, like, digital and electrical systems in the world, and can, like, do some software patches and even some hardware patches and stuff, to a limited degree. That's a competency that's not 100%. That's more like maybe like a 30 to 50%. In some cases, she can use this skill. But still important to note, because that's something in her back pocket that I could use later on to, resolve a situation, prove her competency, prove her worth, whatever. What they represent in the story, very important. Some characters will represent ideas or emotions or, whatever, thoughts, religious beliefs, whatever. What they represent in the story, I think, comes more into play when we get into supporting characters and side characters. Still very important to think about when you're writing your protagonist and your antagonist. And then, of course, you have sections here for, like, backstory, other notes. Anything in the book about a character's backstory should be relevant to their journey now. And that provides emotional clarity. It creates emotional motivation. Like, a reader at any point should understand why a character is acting this, like, any particular way. For example, in the Wild Sky Legacy, the first one, Arden's boyfriend, Subra, is apparently captured by pirates, and she's desperate to get him. We have to, it's not enough that I kind of reveal that like, oh, they're together and Subaru was captured, so of course Arden wants to go after them. It's not enough. We have to show the reader that Subaru is everything to Arden, that she doesn't have a family, that she doesn't have any other support structure other than Subaru. And we have to show that he's like a good guy, like he is genuinely trying to take care of her, even if it's not necessarily in the best ways, but like he genuinely is a good person that really cares about her. And if that is not clear, then the reader will be like, yeah, I understand that, like, he's her boyfriend, so she wants to save him. Like, yeah, but if you give them that like emotional context, that like if you dig just a little bit deeper, if you're just a little bit more intentional with that setup, so that the reader really feels that desperation of like, Arden's life was literally just ripped away. Like, she has nothing else. Like, Subaru was practically her everything. We need to make sure that like that reader really understands that and feels that emotional depth of her desperation and her motivation to finding him, to the point where she is willing to travel across the entire world to find him and rescue him, and would do practically anything to do that. So backstory, other notes, all of this needs to be tied to the main character, to their journey, to who they are, especially as it relates to that story core. So moving into the antagonist we build very similarly. The one thing when it comes to the antagonist, and I think I talk about it a little bit in this like kind of opening, the antagonist is there for more than just like creating conflict, creating pressure, for creating growth opportunities for the main character. A lot of the times they'll be competing for the same goal. So one of my favorite examples of this is The Dark Knight, and you have Batman and you have the Joker. You might be like, oh, well, they're not really competing for the same thing. Yes, they are. They are competing for Gotham's soul. Like, that is what they're competing for. The Joker has an idea of like, oh, people are like, anyone can be, unhinged and me if they're just given a little push. Like, that's his kind of philosophy. But Bruce Wayne, Batman, is like, no, like, people are good. Like, they can make the right decisions. They can do the right things. Like, they're not like that. And they have this competing ideology, and that is like the core of their struggle with one another. The antagonist has to kind of compete with the main character for the same thing, and that causes them to butt heads a little bit. It could be philosophically, it could be an actual MacGuffin, like an actual tangible thing in the world. But one thing that I really like to do with my antagonists is almost make them I almost want the main character, the protagonist, to have a moment where they like look at the antagonist toward the end and they're like, I could have been you. Like, if things had gone a little different, if I had made a few different decisions, I could have been you. Almost as like a warning. The antagonist doesn't have to be inherently evil. They don't have to be wrong or corrupt or anything like that. They just have to be adversarial to the protagonist, whether that is through thought, through idea, whatever. They should also have a fleshed out backstory. They should have the lie that they believe. They should have the want, their need. And maybe they are a character that doesn't, that they doubled down on that lie. So, if we take the way back to us and Davin, if we almost frame him as an antagonistic character, when it comes to confronting like, do I have to do this all on my own? He's like, yes, absolutely. And in doing so, he loses everything. He loses people. He loses, the battles, whatever. And we see it almost as like a cautionary tale. So maybe, the antagonist doesn't learn. Maybe they are very similar to the protagonist, but they don't learn from their lie. Maybe they double down on that lie. Backstory, other notes, all that needs to be connected. The supporting characters is something that I really wanted to dig into for just a moment, because they play very critical roles. It's fun to have like the comic relief character or like whoever, the mentor. There's like a lot of good stereotypes out there. But I think one thing that I have found in my writing journey that I think is really critical when it comes to writing supporting characters is they need to be like these kind of catalysts for growth. Like, they should be teaching the main character something. In the Wild Sky Legacy, I try and make it's kind of like an ensemble cast, because Arden, the main character, is part of this crew, the Skyship crew. Every single one of them kind of has something to teach her, and they all kind of push her in another way, and like in some way to help her grow overall. I think a really good example of a supporting characters in the wild is actually How I Met Your Mother, the TV show. Ted is the main character. He's kind of looking for love. And look at his two best friends, right? You have on one side you have Barney Stinson, and on the other side you have Marshall Erickson. Marshall Erickson is the classic like boyfriend to husband to father. Like he is he represents like monogamy, like finding someone, settling down, all that kind of stuff. Barney, on the other hand, represents like being single and dating a lot and finding new people and all that kind of stuff. And Ted kind of oscillates back and forth. Each side has something to teach him about relationships and love and life in general. But we see these two kind of opposing forces right on either side of him that kind of push him and pull him in both directions. Very critical. Or we could look at, Harry Potter. And Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger. Ron Weasley in the books, not necessarily the movies, in the books, he has the world smarts, the street smarts. He has grown up in the wizarding world. He understands like all the culture, all the nuances of culture and their society and everything. Hermione, on the other hand, has none of that. She's Muggle born, but is like the book smarts. She understands like the theory, the magic, how it works. And between these two, Harry learns a lot about being a wizard, about the wizarding world, and how to be a functional wizard in there and play to his strength. Ron and Hermione, different offerings. They both represent something different, but are there and very important as guides, as teachers for Harry in different ways. So when it comes to our supporting characters and specifically what they represent in the story, this is where you have the opportunity to really create meaningful supporting characters that will help teach the main protagonist about the story core, about the moral, about overcoming the lie that they believe in very specific and intentional ways. Because you're never going to have one character who's like the mentor and teach them everything they need to know. That just feels a little cheap. It doesn't feel super realistic. I think that you need to spread those lessons out a little bit, and the supporting characters is how you do that. They should each represent a different idea that helps the character grow in a particular way to fully embody that story core at the end. So, for example, in The Way Back to Us, Davin's girl, Theo. Theo is someone who can tell him about who he was, the way that he treated her. She is his old spark, his romantic flame, and she really helps him clarify this vision or this pattern of his behavior. Like, hey, you've always been this way. Like, you've always been guarded. You've always you need to let people in. Vicky also is just kind of like I'll tell you how it is kind of character. Like, she's not super guarded. She's like, no, this is stupid. What a terrible idea. Like, we need to do this my way. So we see like these different characters represent kind of different things and kind of teach and pull Davin in these different ways to help him along his growth arc to become the character that he needs to be in order to get through the climax. So characters, very important. Each need to represent a different thing. In the Storyteller's Almanac, in this workbook, there's this great scaffolding to really build out all these characters. Does it have it all in there? No. Is it the perfect scaffolding for characters? No, but it gives you something. It gives you a lot of room, a lot of depth to really build this character on different levels in a way that helps them come alive and really mean something to the reader. Going through this and working on this, you're not going to be able to just sit down and just like write it all out at once. Building these characters takes time. It takes days. It takes drafts and revisions and coming back to them. So if you don't get it right on the first try, like don't feel, or like if you don't know, if you don't have like the questions answered, don't feel like you need to. Writing a character, creating a character is a journey in itself. Give yourself the opportunity to come back to revise things. At one point in the Wild Sky Legacy, Rowan, that dramatic character that I talk about sometimes, at first he was like a banker. He was like a financier, kind of like a millionaire, billionaire kind of guy. In like some of the first drafts that I wrote, like that's who he was. Not anymore. I went back, I was like, no, this isn't right. It's not as fun as I wanted it to be. And so I made him be an actor, and that made him feel a lot more realistic, a lot more fleshed out, but also changed. Like I had to go back and rewrite and make some adjustments there. It takes time. It's a process. But hopefully the things, the prompts in the Storyteller's Almanac give you enough to start and enough to really start to build out these characters so that they can really function and be vibrant in the story that you're telling.